Mr. Juan Camilo Pinzón. He is serving as Safeguarding and Health and Safety Quality Assurance Lead at Cognita Schools. Juan is an international humanitarian and education specialist with more than a decade of experience in emergency preparedness, humanitarian response, education and emergencies, and resilience building across Latin America and the Caribbean. Prior to joining Cognita Schools, he held leadership roles with UNICEF, Save the Children International, and the World Food Programme, where he contributed to emergency preparedness, early warning systems, humanitarian coordination, and disaster response. Today, he will present on keeping schools cool in the warming world. Juan, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Srina. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation, Ricardo, Walter, TecHive, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Today, I would like to share some practical ideas on how schools can respond to this growing challenge of urban heat. As Srina mentioned, I work at Cognita Schools. At Cognita Schools in Latam, we're now facing two different but connected realities. We have schools in cities, Colombia cities, Mexico City, such as Valledupar, Santa Marta, and Cartagena, Mexico City, where high temperatures have always been part of a local climate, but we also have schools in cities that were traditionally milder, where hotter days and heat events are now becoming increasingly frequent. Medellin and Cali in Colombia, also Mexico City. So these two realities means that heat can no longer be considered a facilities or infrastructure issue. It is now a health and safety issue, a safeguarding issue, a learning issue, and more increasingly, a business continuity issue. So today I will focus on what we do in our existing schools and some tips on what we can consider when designing new ones. So let me begin by explaining why heat is really changing the profiling of schools. As you may know, children are particularly vulnerable to heat. They may dehydrate more quickly, may not always recognize the early symptoms of heat stress, and often depend on adults to regulate their activities and access to water. This also applies to staff. Sometimes we have older staff who work and operate in hotter spaces, cafeterias, kitchens, maintenance spaces, amongst others. This also means that heat can also affect the quality of the learning environment. A classroom may technically remain open, but if students and teachers are uncomfortable, they're tired, or they're unable to concentrate, the learning is disrupted. Impact goes beyond classrooms. Heat can affect PE, physical education. It can affect assemblies, outdoor play, educational visits, transport, etc., kitchens. And they also may affect the ability of staff to carry out their work safely. So I was mentioning, we have two campus realities. The first is emerging heat. Schools designed for a milder climate are now experiencing hotter conditions than those for which they were originally designed. These classrooms, they didn't have AC originally. So now without AC, students and staff are no longer able to concentrate. The second is chronic heat. We have schools in cities such as Valledupar, Santa Marta, and Cartagena, the coastal cities of Colombia, where extreme heat should already be treated as normal cooperating condition. So the core message is simple. We need to design and operate our schools for the climate they're going to face, not for the climate that existed when they were built. So in order to organize our response, we suggest a very simple cooling hierarchy. So Ashish, we can go to the next slide, please. Slide number 3. Thank you very much. So as you can see, this hierarchy begins by reducing the amount of heat that enters and accumulates in the school. So first, what we need to do is reduce solar heat gain to roofs, windows, walls, and any large areas of concrete or asphalt. The second is we need to create shade. This includes not only in classrooms, but courtyards, sports areas, walkways, entrances, and pickup zones. The third is we need to improve ventilation and air movement through cross ventilation, ceiling fans, and where appropriate, high volume fans, those really big fans that you see sometimes in malls. Fourth, you need to provide mechanical cooling in spaces where passive measures alone cannot maintain safe and comfortable conditions. This is where we're talking about air conditioning. And finally, we need to manage heat operationally through hydration, scheduling, monitoring, maintenance, and clear heat response procedures. So one of the most important messages from this hierarchy is that we should not only rely on air conditioning. The AC may be necessary, especially in hot and humid cities, but the most resilient approach combines the building design, vegetation, of course, shade, equipment, and daily operational decisions. A school that depends on AC can become very vulnerable when there's equipment failure, there's a maintenance problem, or any power disruption. And of course, this is really important as well, the cost of electricity. So how can we apply this to the schools that we already have? So Ashish, you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we suggest 3 stages. For the inexistent schools, the key principle is to work in stages. This is suggested and something that we're piloting in some of our schools in Cognita. Really important to note that we do not need to wait for a large capital project before taking action. We can do some things with very minimal capital. So in the first 3 months, the schools can begin by identifying their hottest classrooms, the outdoor areas, and any circulation routes. This can be done through very simple temperature and humidity sensors, observations, and feedback from students and staff. AI can also be a great tool to map these hotspots and circulation routes. Schools can then adjust the PE, physical education, assemblies, outdoor activities, and maintenance work so that the most demanding activities, they don't take place during the hottest part of the day. This is kind of obvious, but some schools sometimes still have PE at noon, which is, of course, not recommended. You also need to confirm that any drinking water is accessible, that you have refill points that are functioning, and the students have shaded places where they can rest and recover. In Cognita Schools, we have a UV ray policy, which has a mandatory implementation in schools that have the highest temperatures or the highest UV ray index. You can also implement existing blinds, curtains, fans, and air conditioning systems. They also need to be reviewed. Sometimes the problem is that not the absence of equipment, but poor maintenance. So unsuitable controls or obvious places where heat's entering the building. So next, during the next 3 to 18 months period of time, you can introduce a more targeted physical improvement. This may include external window, shading, shade sails, covered walkways, reflective roof coatings, roof insulation, ceiling fans, and any additional vegetation. This is something I cannot stress enough, the importance of increasing the tree canopy in all schools. Trees are super important in our schools. You can also replace or reduce any dark heat storing surfaces and introduce cooler or permeable materials. Also, window improvements can help control solar radiation, but you need to ensure that they preserve natural light, ventilation, and appropriate safeguarding sightlines. We need to ensure that there's always visibility to all spaces of schools. And then over the long term, 18 months and up, some schools may need some more significant intervention and investment. This could include upgrading roofs, building envelopes, redesigning courtyards. We can also install efficient zone cooling systems, creating solar canopies. This is very important, that both provide energy and shade. We're investing heavily in this, investing in solar panels in our schools. This is super important. And I say that the most important point is that the investment should be based on evidence. We should first understand where the greatest exposure occurs and then target the interventions that will produce the greatest safety and comfort benefits. AI can also be a great tool to get this evidence that we need to provide to invest. So in our harder cities, however, the baseline needs to be higher. So if you can go to next slide, please, Ashish. Thank you. Thank you. So for campuses, cities such as Valledupar, Santa Marta, Cartagena, heat should not be treated as an exceptional event. This is a normal design and operational condition. So these schools need a continuous network of shade, trees, and more trees, as you can see in the picture. So ideally, students should be able to move from the entrance to the classrooms, dining areas, sport facilities without any prolonged exposure to direct sunlight. Reliable cooling should be prioritized in classrooms, infirmaries, staff areas, kitchens, and at any other high occupancy or high-risk spaces. Schools should also monitor heat conditions, have a clear arrangement for hydration, PE, sports competitions, or any outdoor events. And as we were mentioning before, another important consideration is the resilience of the cooling systems. Preventive maintenance, energy management, and contingency arrangements are essential. An air conditioning failure in any coastal city can quickly become an operational and health and safety problem. So schools need to know which rooms can remain operational, which spaces can serve as a temporary cool spaces, and when activities may need to be relocated or maybe even suspended. So heat resilience should be reflected not only in facilities, but also in safeguarding, health and safety, sports, educational visits, and any emergency planning. And I was listening to the presentation that Ashish made earlier, and I think it's really important to mention that AI can support schools by identifying these heat risk areas across campuses. We can also analyze weather and building data, predicting high risk periods, and helping to prioritize interventions such as shade, ventilation, cooling systems, landscaping, and maintenance. AI can also be a great tool to help compare scenarios and guide investment decisions, ensuring that heat resilience are targeted, evidence-based, and adapted to each school context. So for new schools, we do have the opportunity to address many of these challenges from the beginning. So Ashish, we can please go to the next slide. Slide number 6. Thank you. So very, very shortly, what we suggest for the new schools, designing for future climate. For any new construction, heat resilience should be a part of the initial design brief rather than an issue that is considered afterwards. So site planning and building orientation are fundamental. As was mentioned earlier, buildings should minimize excessive exposure to the low morning and afternoon sun, especially on east and west facing buildings. The design should preserve natural wind paths, and wherever possible, you need to build around existing older trees. The building envelope should incorporate deep overhangs, external shading, insulated reflective roof, and carefully designed glazing. Any outdoor area should include tree canopy, shaded courtyards, covered circulation routes, and materials that do not absorb and release excessive heat. And the ventilation strategy should be adapted to the local climate. National ventilation may work effectively in some cities and sometimes during certain periods of the day, but in hot and humid locations, a mixed mode solution that combines natural vegetation, ventilation, with efficient zone cooling may be more appropriate. Energy systems are also super important. Solar generation and intelligent controls can help schools manage cooling more efficiently. However, technology alone is not enough. Systems need to be practical, maintainable, and properly commissioned. And any well-designed building should continue to provide usable and safe spaces during periods of extreme heat. Equipment failure or future climate conditions that may be more demanding than those that we experience today. So the final question is, how do we turn these ideas into a consistent approach? So Ashish, you can go to the last slide. Thank you. So this is a practical roadmap that we are piloting in Cognita, something that we propose. So first, you need to diagnose campus heat maps, room level information, feedback from students and staff, and of course, an understanding of the condition of existing assets. AI, again, can be a great tool for the diagnosis part. Then you need to prioritize, focus first on the youngest students, the most exposed groups and staff, and the hottest rooms, of course, and the periods of greatest risk. Third, you need to pilot. A useful approach is to select one school that experiences emerging heat and one school with chronically hot city. So this would allow us to test different combinations of operational measures, shading, ventilation, and cooling. Fourth, you need to standardize. Any lesson from these pilots can inform a heat resilience standard and policy that covers new construction, existing buildings, and school operations. And finally, you need to measure. You need to monitor not only temperature, but also the number of uncomfortable indoor hours, any heat-related incidents, operational disruption, energy consumption, attendance, and of course, feedback from students and staff. So the objective is not simply to create cooler buildings. The objective is to provide safer, healthier, and uninterrupted learning environments. This is ultimately what school heat resilience should achieve. So as a conclusion, as our climate continues to change, I think the schools that will perform best are not necessarily those with the most air conditioning. They will be the schools that combine intelligent design, effective operations, reliable systems, and a clear understanding of their local risks. So that's it from my side. Thank you very much, and looking forward to hear my other co-presenters on this interesting session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juan, for that insightful presentation. I particularly appreciated that you shifted the conversation from simply recognizing heat as a climate issue to treating it as a planning and operational challenge. One message that really stood out to me was your point that we should design and operate schools for the climate that they will face, not the climate they will originally built for. They were originally built for. I think that is a powerful message, not only for schools, but for cities as a whole. Your practical cooling hierarchy, reduce, shade, ventilate, cool, and manage. It demonstrates that building resilience is not only about relying on a single solution such as air conditioning. It is about combining thoughtful urban design, resilient infrastructure, operational planning, and day-to-day management. I also found your emphasis on phased implementation particularly relevant. Many cities and institutions believe that resilience requires major capital investment, yet you have shown that meaningful improvements can begin immediately through operational changes, while larger infrastructure investment can be planned over time. So thank you so much for this presentation.